Every spiritual teacher tells you to live in the now. It's the ultimate prescription for peace, for presence, for awakening. But we make a classic mistake. We think now is the present moment. But science, metaphysics, and the mystics all tell us the present moment doesn't exist. Time doesn't even flow. So when or where is this now? It does exist, but it's not where you think. And to find it, we have to strip away the greatest illusion your mind has ever constructed. Let's start with the idea of the present moment. When is that present moment? It's the moment just after the past moment and before the moment you're about to step into, right? Well, how long is that moment? Is it a minute? So the minute before is past, the minute coming up is future, and the minute I'm in is the now, is the present moment? A minute's a long time. You can watch a whole short video in a minute. Well, how about the second? The second's the smallest common denominator, right? Second before to the second after, I'm living in the current second. If you've ever watched a race in sports, whether it's a foot race or a bicycle race or a swimming race, those are often decided in fractions of a second. So how many fractions of a second is the present moment? You can keep doing this division down to infinity and always find that the present moment really doesn't exist. All you've got are past moments and future moments. Your brain is locked into this just happened or this is about to happen. And even if it's locked into this is what's happening now, by the time you know what's happening now, it's already past. The present moment doesn't actually have a duration. So that can't be where the now is. But what about the flow of time? Saw a comedian on stage the other day, and he was talking about flying from New York to New Zealand. And he said, I left New York on the morning of the 10th, and I arrived in New Zealand on the morning of the 12th. What happened to the 11th? I want the 11th back. I didn't get to live the 11th. This obviously, is just a quick quip that has to do with calendar time. He crossed the date line, and so he lost a whole day on the calendar, but his clock never really stopped. He experienced the flight all the way through. But it makes a point. A lot of what we think of as time, days, hours, minutes, is just an accounting system for us humans. We made it up so that we could count the passage of time. It's an artificial clock, if you will. And does it always flow smoothly like that? Well, if you ever have a dream at night, and I'm sure we all have, we can live days inside of a dream and wake up and only 5 minutes of clock time have passed. So our experience of time and the flow of time is very different in a dream. I underwent heart surgery a few years ago. That's 6 hours. But I knew going into it that as soon as I went under the anesthesia, my next moment would be waking up in the recovery room. No time, from my perspective, would pass at all. So 6 hours of clock time vanished. No experiential time vanished at all. So the flow of time is very odd as well. Clock time just seems to be an external accounting of this flow. So let's take a look at this from the physics perspective. We start with Newtonian physics, where we have things that change over time. And we assumed before the 20th century that clocks ticked at a constant pace, that change just happened over this constant pace. Then Einstein came along with relativity and said, no, not so fast. Closer you go to the speed of light, the slower time appears to go. The slower you go, the faster time appears to go. He said, really, space-time is one big four-dimensional block. Think of it as the block universe with 4 dimensions. And time doesn't flow at all. We're just traveling through that block. And relativity even says the way we travel through that block can appear faster or slower, depending on our speed, depending how close we are to a massive object, things like that. So time is just a fixed block. Everything is predetermined. Past and present and future are all already written. We're just walking through it as human beings. Well, Then Hawking came along and said, wait a minute, you're forgetting about quantum mechanics. And in quantum mechanics, when an observation is made, it collapses the wave function and collapses the stuff in the past that's still in superposition in order to bring us to the present moment. That is not a block universe. There are probabilities that still exist in the past that haven't been collapsed yet. Hawking called this his top-down cosmology, and he said there's no single physical past sitting behind us. Really, there's a set of histories that are in superposition that collapse when an observation is made. And he put it this way in a very telling quote. The present state of the universe creates the past. We create history by our observation, rather than history creating us. So now time is again, I might want to say more fluid. It's not necessarily flowing, but it is collapsing backwards as we observe it. Another way to look at this that Hawking again had, he talked about an angel view of the universe and a frog view of the universe. The frog view is who we are. We are in the timeline, walking through time, forced to see time in this little narrow window. The angel view is from outside of space-time altogether, looking down on it. It's like looking at this one set of film reels, not quite the block universe, but you're looking across all of time and space from this angel view. And he sees this as the timeless tree of all possible histories at once. He thinks of time as the sum of all histories, and when we make an observation, we collapse those histories into one embedded history. From the point of view of the frog, you're just moving frame by frame through this reel. From the point of view of the angel, you're seeing it all at once, and it is changing all the way across past, present, and future, all at once as observations are made. So now time and history isn't concrete, it's really an observer-dependent calculation. Now let's take that up one notch further. My last video, Reality is Mental, we talked about that space-time isn't really physical at all. It is a perceived reality. Just like we perceive time in its flow, we're actually perceiving the physical universe. So reality itself is a perception, is mental. Thinking of the Bernardo Kastrup way of looking at it from my analytic idealism, we are actually individual alters through which the universe perceives itself. Think of those individual alters as the frog view, and the universe perceiving itself as the angel view, but it's perceiving a mental reality instead of a physical reality. Bernardo Kastrup then calls this the crystal of eternity. All of reality is a mental crystal of eternity that contains all possibilities. Kind of similar to containing all possible histories, isn't it? So the angel view isn't a physical multiverse. It's really mind at large, containing all the potentials. Time is not a physical river you travel through. Think of it as a sequential rendering in your frog view, like a localized headset, scanning through the reality as you go. So, how do we actually find that state? Where do we now find the now? Eckhart Tolle, and many mystics, but Eckhart Tolle famously said, if you meditate and you watch your thoughts in meditation, you're not silencing them, you're watching them. There's a gap sometimes between the thoughts. And as you keep watching them, that gap grows. In that gap, time is not flowing at all. It's just there. It's just pure awareness, and time seems to stop. We see this in sports as well. I used to be a long-distance cyclist. I once rode from Oakland to Yosemite and back, a 500-mile trip. How did I get through that? I told myself, I'm just pedaling. That's all I'm doing is pedaling. I'm not thinking about when am I going to be done pedaling. I'm not thinking about how much more miles do I have to go. I'm just pedaling. It would put me in this meditative state that allowed me to just pedal, and suddenly I was at my destination and stopped pedaling. essentially stopping time by getting in the zone of cycling. There was a great example of this in 1982. Something called the Race Across America, which then got rebranded as the Great American Bike Race. 4 racers going from Santa Monica to New York. Who could get to New York first? Now that's 3,000 miles across America. 2 of those competitors. One was a professor of psychology, had all the tricks in the book. Had the meditative tricks, had someone doing hypnosis on him, had his scientific equipment in the support fans measuring how far he had gone, exactly what his pace was, when he needed to take rest stops, things like that. I remember seeing this years ago, and he talked about having a bit of a Buddhist mindset, where he could go into these meditative states, but he had all this equipment around him, and he thought he had it pegged because he had the mental game pegged. But if you think about it, he's marking time as he goes. He's marking every rest stop, marking every sleep. Then there was another guy, Lon Haldeman from Illinois. And when he was asked how he trained, he said, I bicycle a lot. I just like to pedal. I just like to bicycle. Well, how do you get through a long ride? I just pedal. They called him on Wide World of Sports and a simple man. But as soon as I saw that in 1982, I looked at it and said, he may not know it, but that's the real Buddhist. And he's going to win because he knows how to get in the zone and stop time and just pedal. And he won by a lot, breaking the prior world record by a lot. We also know this from something called being in the zone. If you've ever watched an interview with a baseball player, he'll talk about being up at bat, and the good ones say, I get in this zone, and the ball slows down. And it gets really large as it slows down. It becomes much easier to hit. They have altered their perception of time and allowed themselves more reaction time simply by being in the zone and slowing time down. So these kind of flow states kill the metronome clock. You stop marking time and you act directly from this kind of unmoving center. That is where the now is. The now is not the present moment, sandwiched between some past and future that doesn't exist. What is the now? It's actually you, as universal awareness, in the eternal now.